Okay, welcome to the Wednesday session on the mentorship week of the summer school. I'm very excited to introduce you to Patricia Feeney. She has a role as head of metadata at Crossref, where she started in this role in 2018 to bring together all aspects of metadata, such as strategy and overall vision, review and introduction of content, new content types, best practices around inputs, such as content creator registration, as well as outputs, representations through their APIs, and consulting with the community about metadata. Patricia has been with Crossref for 10 years, which has helped thousands of publishers understand how to record and distribute metadata for millions of scholarly items. She's also worked in various scholarly publishing roles as a system librarian and cataloger. Patricia has degrees from the University of Maryland, University of Baltimore, and University of Rhode Island in English, publication, design, and library information science. Please join me in welcoming Patricia. Patricia, go ahead.
Thank you. I should update my bio. I'm realizing because I've actually worked for Crossref for 15 years, which is a fairly long time. And I've worked for Crossref since 2007, and we're really, I think, become a very important infrastructure organization in scholarly communication over the many years. I've been with Crossref, and it's been really rewarding to see us evolve into what we are today. But today for this presentation, I'm here to talk about an important part of scholarly communication infrastructure, which is the metadata about all of the outputs generated by research. I'm also going to talk a lot about Crossref. That's the bulk of my experience, and I hope it doesn't sound like a marketing pitch, but I think it's really important to understand Crossref as an organization to see what's really needed to create sustainable, persistent metadata. As we know, infrastructure is really vital. Wi-Fi is really important, and when it fails, all kinds of things go wrong, as we've just seen. So I think many of you have some basic familiarity with Crossref, but I'll go over some information just to kind of set the context. I think a lot of people are familiar with Crossref as an organization that registers identifiers, DOIs, and provides some metadata, and they may know that we're a not-for-profit organization. But we've been around since 1999. We were created initially by publishers, specifically scholarly publishers like Elsevier, Springer, Nature at the time, Wiley, because they wanted a way to exchange links between article reference lists easily, to avoid having to make numerous bilateral agreements with competitors. And they also wanted a way to link persistently to citations. And the DOI was chosen to support that. So we were a for-profit membership association, and our actual goal at the time was to promote the development and cooperative use of new and innovative technologies to speed and facilitate scientific and other scholarly research. But we mainly functioned as a DOI registration agency for a number of years. And there are a number of other DOI registrations agencies, as you may be aware. From the start, we've allowed our members to register a DOI for publications. Every DOI is associated with a URL to the publication's webpage, and all registrants commit over time to update the URL if the content moves, ensuring every scientific output can be identified through a DOI persistently throughout time, now and in the future. But along with the DOIs and URLs, members register metadata of the publications that they're registering the DOIs for. So as I've mentioned, the primary focus was for many years to facilitate persistent identifier registration and retrieval. And to this day, that's a lot of people's understanding of what Crossref does for the scholarly community. And I do want to note that we facilitate this, but we are a membership organization primarily. So the publishers and now funders and other organizations that create and impact scholarly communication, they're the ones who are actually doing the hard work that we facilitate. we have, as we've evolved, we're starting more and more to really stress the difference between a DOI. A DOI is just an identifier. It points to something, it points to URLs. We also collect millions of metadata records that contain basic required metadata, but will also hopefully contain more robust metadata that I'll get into a little bit more, like other persistent identifiers, abstracts, license metadata, lots of metadata that is open and people find useful. One of the unique things about Crossref is our membership. It's very global. For many years, our membership was dominated by UK, US, and European publishers. But as you can see in this chart, that's changed quite a bit, especially over the last decade, maybe even over the last 5 years. We've seen a massive change. The member with the largest percentage is Indonesia. Turkey and South Korea, as you can see, also have a large chunk of our membership. And really, we have memberships everywhere. We've got a number of publishers in Africa that we work with, a lot in India, really all around the world. And also the metadata we collect is across disciplines, which I think it can be a little bit unusual. So when we first started to collect metadata, it was expressed as a very basic DTD, and it just collected basic citation information. But at this point, as we evolved, there was a recognition that the metadata wasn't just useful for basic DOI to citation connection. Discoverability metadata became essential for enriching databases and formatting citations. Other metadata was added that went beyond the basics, and we started collecting information about retractions and updates to content. And at this point, we collect a wide range of content, funding data, license data. We're registering DOIs for open peer reviews and preprints and grants. And we're really leaning heavily into incorporating whatever sustainable persistent identifiers that we can collect into our metadata to make those really durable connections. So as we've grown as an organization, we've had to do a lot of thinking about what we want to accomplish as an organization and how we want to do it. So our more recent mission statement is what you see here. We want to make outputs easy to find, cite, link, assess, and reuse. And I think the important part is that we really just exist to make scholarly communications better, and that's through infrastructure and technology and metadata. Organization-wise, we've adopted the principles of open scholarly infrastructure, also known as POSI. POSI consists of 16 principles. They are best practices for running open scholarly infrastructure that also enables open infrastructure to build trust with the broader research community, and also can be used to assess and hold account these infrastructure services. And they fall into 3 categories: governance, sustainability, and insurance. So, for governance, it has to be governed by the stakeholders, so the people who run the organization are really invested in the organization doing well. Membership needs to be fairly open and transparent. And the organization should be sustainable, have a way to sustain itself beyond a short term. So you can see it's not just about a particular type of identifier or a type of technology. It's more about how the infrastructure is governed, developed, and sustained. And the really important, I think, theme that runs through all of the POSI principles is transparency, and which facilitates trustworthiness. So you can trust the organization that is providing these vital infrastructure services, and you can trust that they'll be dependable and open. At this point, there are 12 organizations that have endorsed these principles, and these are all organizations we work with. They either use our metadata or we participate with them in some way. It's really important to Crossref that we support these as we're open foundational infrastructure, meaning what we do can be built on and our metadata is incorporated into other services. Crossref DOIs are used for a wide range of scholarly content, but our goal is really to capture the scholarly record. So metadata and relationships are essential. It's essential that we survive and are open and transparent to promote these for the future. So these principles shape how we want to act as an organization and how we need to sustain ourselves. But what we want to actually accomplish, and this gets into more my specific role, which is what I'm more excited about. What are we doing and trying to do? So that this question leads us to what our metadata infrastructure is used for and how it impacts scholarly communication. So I can't say we've come up with this idea. I think it's a common idea across organizations, but we're really considering our goal as an organization to create a research nexus. As we develop the metadata registered with us, we're able to really see a new vision for how we want to grow, what we collect, and how that will impact the scholarly community. We want to create a rich and reusable open network of relationships, connecting research organizations, people, things, and action, a scholarly record that the global community can build on forever for the benefit of society. So this goes beyond the basic idea of just identifying content. Journal articles, book chapters, grants, preprints, data, protocols, affiliations, etc. They should all be identified, and that's really important. But what's more than important to us metadata-wise at this point is how they relate to each other and how they connect. So we've been working with our metadata to provide richer metadata for a widening set of objects and making fairly granular connections between them. Metadata describes something, but if you go beyond that, it can capture when something is commented on, how something's funded, what outputs come of a grant. So that's really important for reporting on funding for institutions. Does a data set turn into a preprint that turns into a journal article? Can you figure out what affiliations a project investigator has? Or who curated a data set versus who wrote a journal article. Some of this is in place in some way, but it's new enough that we are still gathering this critical mass of metadata, and some of this metadata is still evolving. We're still trying to figure out how best to capture it and share it with the community. So as an organization, we've spent a lot of time implementing new content types like preprints and grants, and creating relationships to capture versions and link preprints to versions of records and grants to literature. And as a community, we still need to identify the different objects, but beyond that, it's the relationships between them that are becoming very important. So in many ways, this whole Nexus idea is aspirational, but we've made some concrete steps towards building it out. I thought it might be useful. I think people often find it interesting how metadata actually gets to Crossref. As I mentioned, we've been around since 1999. So in some ways, our own infrastructure is a little outdated. Some might consider it. We currently accept XML files from our members. We have our own metadata schema that was developed by Crossref that I currently maintain. I think ideally we'd like the dream for us would be, well, for me, would be for us to adapt some kind of global standard set of metadata. We're trying to do more work with schema.org metadata, for example, to make it very easy for members to send metadata to us in a consistent way. Currently, we have our own set of hoops that people have to jump through to send us metadata. We have a number of paths that people can use to get metadata to us. Larger members, particularly publishers, have big systems that are able to spit out Crossref XML and send it to us in an automated way. Smaller organizations have to work a little harder to get metadata to us. We actually have a manual entry tool that is very heavily used. So for some of the DOI metadata that you see in the outputs, for the inputs, someone was actually sitting and cutting and pasting field by field. Okay, this is the author's first name. This is the author's Orchid ID, and pasting that all into a form to register DOI metadata, which in 2022 is kind of amazing to me, but that's, you know, I think depending on where these organizations are with the metadata they collect and distribute, that's the best they can do. And I think it's amazing that they do it, that they think it's important enough to have someone sitting at a desk and doing that. But we are increasingly trying to work with organizations like PKP, which runs the OJS platform, which is an open source journal publishing platform, and DOAJ, which also helps the community publish open access publications. We're working with them to make it easier for them to send us cross-ref metadata, which in turn helps the community to make this all easy and seamless. So what we have registered with us now, when a member registers records with Crossref, there are a set of metadata models designed specifically for a certain type of content. I think, so we really see them as silos, which is not the best situation, because there are a number of research outputs out there that we don't specifically collect, but this model is something that we need to sustain for now. One of the issues with being an infrastructure organization is that other organizations build a lot of systems around how you do things. So if we change something, it's really disruptive downstream to publishers. They have to rework what they're doing. They have to make an investment. And, you know, if they've had something that's been working for 15 years, they don't really want to change it. So for now, we have 12 defined metadata models for journals and journal articles, books, conference proceedings, reports, standards, dissertation, peer reviews, preprints, grants, and data sets. But as you can see here, most of the content registered with us is for journal articles and books, maybe some conference papers. And at first glance, it looks like not much else is going on. But if you took growth over the past few years, which is kind of exciting, we've been seeing this diversifying membership. We've added a few new content types. The newer content types have a greater rate of growth. There's a really big uptake in dissertations, posted content on the slide. That actually means preprints. We've seen a lot of uptake on peer review. A lot of members are registering DOIs for open peer review. So if they have the peer review available connected to a journal article, they'll register a DOI for that so that it can be cited and tracked and commit to maintaining that over time. So I see a question in the chat. Can we include policy documents in the Nexus too? That actually, my next point I'm going to make, if you look at this slide, we have a lot of content and data sets, and we actually don't really promote registering data sets with Crossref because DataCite exists. They do a great job of registering data, and they have a lot of relationships with repositories and you know, places where you're going to put your data. And they've really actively developed their schema for data sets. And so we're happy to let them do that because it's fairly complicated. But we've supported our support for data sets predates DataCite, and we have this is not the best thing in the world, but you know, sometimes you have to make compromises. We have members register content as data sets that we don't fully support. The reason is our data set model is very simple. The registration fee is also a little cheaper. So people tend to they'll register if they have some kind of a policy document that doesn't fit into another one of our silos, they'll register it as a data set. And that means on the output, it'll be identified as a data set, but you'll also have, the title, author, you'll be able to provide a persistent link to that, at least until we are able to fully expand support for other types of content. So not an ideal situation, but we are doing the best we can with it for now. Within the metadata records we collect, they all have very basic citation metadata, but this additional metadata we collect, there's a big range of what people are actually sending to us. I'd say a lot of members are sending references, a lot of members are sending license information, so they can send us a URL to a license, like a CC BY license that describes how that content can be used. We've been accepting abstracts since 2014, but we haven't made a big push to get our members to register them, but we have in recent years. There's an organization, I4OA initiative for open abstracts that's really advocating with the community for our members to send us open abstracts, and they've done a lot to have more members register abstracts with us. If you look at the metadata records that have a publication date with our metadata since 2019, you'll see that more of those actually have this more robust member metadata. More than half have references and license information. We're getting a lot more affiliation metadata, and we recently expanded our schema to accept affiliation IDs for organizations, the ROR identifier, which is a newish identifier for research organizations. We support that. We support ISNI and the wiki data IDs, I think. So we are starting to build connections with relationships. These are the relationships we support here. I won't go through them, but they are very publishing centric, but we're having conversations to grow this in different ways. We started registering grants a few years ago, and so we're working with our funding organizations to start registering more metadata about that describes relationships between grants and research outputs, for example. And we expect that will grow, and we're trying to grow these in concert with DataCite, for example, so that these relationships can be used consistently through the metadata that's output. So the metadata we actually have, the relationships we actually have in our metadata, it's a little sparse. We're trying to really grow this. The most provided relationships are the ones that are required, being like the review of relationship. If someone registers a peer review with us, they're required to relate that item to the item that's being reviewed. So we've got a lot of those. We've established a preprint best practice. So it's not required, obviously, because some preprints don't turn into journal articles. But if a journal article is identified for a preprint, we ask that relationship be put in our preprint repositories we work with are very good about doing their best to do that. But we hope that this set of relationships will grow and help build this research nexus for us. This slide here is taken from an analysis we did a year or two ago about how to track how metadata records are becoming more complete over time. It shows the percentage of publications containing a particular metadata type published over time. So for most types of metadata, the overall trend shows the records becoming more complete. So we're hoping in a few years we'll have a more complete research nexus. This slide does mention open references. For most of our history, we've allowed members to register references with us, but not make them available via our APIs for various legacy reasons. But as of June, all of the metadata registered with us is open. So if a member is registering a set of references with us, you'll be able to retrieve that from our API. So our metadata is used by a wide variety of organizations to do a range of tasks. We're often a part of a larger set of metadata records used to enhance the service. So a lot of peer review systems, databases, a lot of educational tools, data analytics use Crossref metadata. One of the services that's built on top of Crossref metadata, I think this is a really good example, is the Orchid auto update service. So if an author or a contributor has an Orchid ID, Orchid comes to us, looks at our metadata, and if they find a new record with your Orchid ID, they'll push that record to your Orchid profile, so you don't have to do anything to update that. All you have to basically do is grant permission. So, sorry, I have to let my dog out of the room. He snuck in here when I was trying to figure out my internet issue. Sorry about that. So how do you get all of this metadata? We have a REST API. If you go to api.crossref.org, we've got comprehensive Swagger-based documentation. If you're familiar with that, I think it'll tell you all the details you need to know, but some basics, the results are returned in JSON. It contains only Crossref metadata and DOIs, so only metadata that's been pushed to us by our members. We do have a few levels of Interact REST API. We have all of the metadata is open for everyone to use, but we do have a plus service that has a guaranteed uptime and response speed for people who are actually building services on top of our metadata. Beyond that, we just ask that if you do use our metadata or use our API on any scale, that you identify yourself within the header as described here. And there's details about this in our documentation as well, just so we know who you are in case you're causing problems. One of the interesting things about running this kind of API is that we have a lot of researchers and organizations use our metadata, and they're not really software developers by trade. So we have a lot of people that come to us and they just kind of hammer our API without a real awareness of how fast they should be sending things, or how fast they should be, how much they should be retrieving at once. So we tend to get a lot of flurries of really intense activity that can cause problems for metadata retrieval. So it's always good to be mindful of that. And as far as the metadata that is retrieved from Crossref, you can use and redistribute any metadata you retrieve with the Crossref REST API. We consider metadata to be facts, and that this metadata doesn't need a license. We do collect abstracts from our members. So if our members opt to send in an abstract with their metadata record, they know it will be distributed openly, but it's still ultimately subject to any copyright that they've placed on it. So that's the only caveat we have with our metadata. You're free to pull it down, interrogate it, do whatever, but the publisher themselves might have some copyright on the abstract, so maybe you shouldn't be republishing it or something like that. We do have a few other ways to retrieve our metadata. We support content negotiation, so you can come to us usually using like a curl query and retrieve metadata in one of these specific ways. This is a service we provide in collaboration with some other organizations, DataCite and Medra, which is a European Doi registration agency. So as you can see here, you can come to us and get RDF XML, siteproc JSON. You can get it in our own native formats as well. And we also support have support for XML interrogation. You can come to us and get the XML, which is pretty much what the publishers provided to us in a variety of ways, and all of that information is on our website. Another way to get our metadata, if you have a lot of storage space, we provide a public data file. We do a dump of all of our metadata records and put it up on academic torrents every year. The last one we put up was made available in May, and it's 160 gigabytes. So it has everything that was registered with us up until May. So, a lot of people come to us, retrieve the whole corpus, and then just, fill in the gaps for the past few months, which is pretty easy to do. All right. I think that's about it. I was going to talk a little bit about our event data service, but I know we're running short on time. I'll just say that we do offer this event data API that collects information about where DOIs are used out in the wild, like in Twitter and blogs and places like that. And we collaborate with DataCite on that. So that's another very research nexus-y thing where we make these connections between when something's cited in DataCite from a cross-ref record. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Patricia. Let's give her some virtual applauses. So if there are any questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. And ideally, maybe, let's see if that you are there with a camera or something like that. There were a couple of questions in the chat. I can read them to you, Patricia. So the first one is, can we include, I don't know if you answered this, can we include policy documents in Nexus? I think you touched a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think I did answer that. You can basically register anything. It just might not be clearly identified as what it is.
Okay, Eric has a question.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Thank you for your talk. You talked about records needing some cross-ref curation when members send metadata to register. My question is about the possibility of the community submitting supplemental information or enriching the metadata record. So my work often uses the corresponding author field, which is not always called out or provided in the metadata, and that propagates down to like dimensions, which is where I'm looking for the data, and it's not there. So I have to go line by line and look it up manually on the publisher website. So is there a way for me to contribute that missing piece to Crossref and improve the record so someone else in the future can avoid that, even if it's just me again in the future? I imagine you have to be approved or a trusted member or something to add things, but is there any thought to that?
We don't support that currently. It's something we're working on for a way for members in the community outside of our membership to make assertions about our metadata, but unfortunately there isn't a way to do that. But we are actually planning to add support for corresponding authors, and then we of course have to get our members to actually send us that bit of metadata. So yeah, so it's not currently something we support.
Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So any more questions? I see comments. Han, I don't know if you want to ask a question, or Elena. Oh, there's a comment. I guess Han is saying you're doing a great job. So, Oscar, do you want to ask? Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you very much for the presentation. So in our group project, we are looking at the relationship between open access, publication access, publication and gender issue. We try to get the information about the fees open access journals ask to authors to pay APC, but we don't have any list or some kind of, because there are some journals, they provide open access, I think gold status,
Mhm.
but there's no information about they ask APC or not.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea or recommendation for us to look for, to get which journals requires a fee and which doesn't?
Yeah, I know that's very difficult information to get. It's not really provided clearly or consistently. We've discussed including that in our metadata, and when we looked at it a few years ago, we determined that it was something that publishers probably wouldn't send us and that they wouldn't agree necessarily on the vocabulary. So unfortunately, I don't have any recommendations for you in that area. It's hard.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
So I have a question. So although authors, I believe, have Orchid ID, right, for the ones that have available in the metadata, but some of them don't. So are there any plans for doing some sort of disambiguation where we have an identifier for authors, institutions, and things like that, maybe joining forces with others that are trying to do the same?
We've talked about the need for that. We're currently in a place with our own infrastructure where we have a very old system that makes it basically everything in our database is stored as an XML record, and which makes it very hard to really import things and export things and collaborate. We're actually rebuilding the system, which is pretty exciting. And that sort of activity is on our long list of things we want to do. I know we have a lot of open channels of communication with Orchid in particular. I know they've talked about wanting to do a lot of disambiguation, and we do have a plan to include other contributor identifiers in our metadata in the future, which would, allow someone to send in, an ISNI or something for someone, and we could link that up to an Orchid, but that's going to be a few years down the road.